Well, thank you for joining us on Let the Healing Begin podcast. I'm your host, Asia. And today we have Edward Miskie. Did I say that right?
You sure did.
Okay. And how are you?
I'm good. It's been a busy day and it's beautiful outside for the first time in days. It's just been raining here in New York forever and ever, and I don't think I've left my apartment in 3 days because
Really?
of it.
Oh, man. Hopefully you got enough food and stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I'm good. And plus
Okay.
like the delivery game here is pretty tight, so
Oh, yeah.
I'm all set.
And it probably doesn't take long because they're probably everything is so close there.
Yeah, I'm really lucky. I live up in Washington Heights, up on the hill, and everything I need is within like 2 blocks. And if it's not, it's down the hill and it's super easy to get. So delivery is like 30 minutes, 45 at most.
Oh, that's not
Um,
bad at all.
no, and it's just everything. I mean, like it's everything. Like I can have my laundromat come and pick up my clothing, go wash it, and bring it back.
Oh, that's nice.
Um, it's like still affordable, which is I cannot say that for the Upper West Side, which is where I used to live for the last 10 years. So it's a nice change. I really like it up here. It's quiet,
Hmm.
you know.
So which part of New York are you in?
Washington Heights. It's
Okay.
uptown, like the top of Manhattan, like the finger part of it. I'm up
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Okay. And born and raised there?
No, no. I mean, almost. I moved here. I was just talking about this the other day, and it's so trippy. I moved here when I was 18,
Hmm.
and in June it will be 18 years since I moved here, and so I have lived here just as long as I've lived. I lived in Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from. Um, so I'm a New Yorker, but not by birth.
Okay. But you like it?
I love it. It's kind of gotten to the point where the city has spoiled me so badly
Oh.
because of like what we were just talking about. Where else can I move where someone's going to come pick my laundry up, clean it, and bring it back to me? Like,
Hmm.
I don't think that really exists in the same way anywhere else. Um, but I've lived here my entire adult life and I don't know anything else.
Hmm.
Certainly I travel, I leave.
Hmm.
Um, I've been to Europe, I've been to South America, I've been to Central America, but like and Canada, if that even counts as traveling, because it's basically the same.
Yeah.
But it's a cool place to be, and what I really love about it, and I know people complain about it being expensive, and it has gotten incredibly out of hand,
Hmm.
but it's also like paying for the convenience of being able to like leave my front door, get on a train, be in the middle of the universe in 30 minutes, see a Broadway show if I want, and like leave and come home.
Hmm.
It's the greatest, and I really do love it here. I always wanted to live here ever since I was a teenager, so I got my wish.
That's good. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So let's take it back to like you growing up. What was your childhood like?
It was it was I, like it was good, like my parents are awesome. They've been together since the 10th grade. They're still together. And we lived in a very, very, very small town. We were surrounded by farms. Half of them were Amish farms. And the town I grew up in, I want to say that the population was something like 2,800. It was very, very tiny. And that kind of afforded us the freedom to be able to play outside whenever we wanted and like get on our bikes and ride for miles around town. And like my
Mm.
parents they weren't bothered by it because
Uh-huh.
we knew everybody. Like it was that kind of town.
Mm.
With the one gas station and the one library and the one pizza place and the little corner store and the one bar that everyone goes to. And it was very safe, and I think that gave my sisters and I a lot of leeway to kind of discover our independence and kind of figure out who we are and how we want to maneuver in the world. During very formative years, when we were children, like little tiny baby kids, and we had there were like hills in our front yard and down the street that we'd go sledding on. And our parents, I guess, were very trusting. It was the 90s, like
Yeah.
things were different. So
When things were good.
I don't know, I wouldn't go that far, but like, it was just different.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I certainly as a child would not want to have social media now. I think that
Yeah.
would just like screw with you in a way that's not. I don't want to think about that. That makes me
Yeah.
social media like fucks with me now,
Hmm.
let alone if I was like an uninformed, like impressionable kid. Like,
Uh-huh.
ugh. But yeah, all that to say, it was good. Music was in the house, art was in the house. My parents were very free with like how we were able to do activities that we wanted to do. We had a big backyard to run around in. And I don't know. I don't think I would change a thing, honestly.
That's good. That's really good. How many sisters do you have?
I have two. I'm the middle.
Okay.
Ooh.
Any brothers at all?
No, no. Um,
So,
and unfortunately, because I had two sisters and I was the middle child and the boy and wish I had brothers, I kind of beat up on them a little bit.
mhm,
And they beat up right back. Like this was
yeah.
not a one-way street. Um, but like I was a bratty little kid. We all were,
Mhm,
but they're cool. My older sister has a doctorate in voice. She teaches yoga and voice. She was in academia for a while. Now she's on her own. And my little sister runs a law firm down in Florida.
Okay,
She's
that's
amazing.
good.
Love them both.
So, what were your teen years like?
Ooh, rough. I think everyone's teen years are rough,
Hmm.
like figuring out who you are and what's going on.
Hmm.
We were very involved in school activities. I'm to this day, I'm still like a busy junkie. Like I just made a TikTok about this. Like if I am not running myself ragged busy, I'm not happy. And
Hmm.
I think that kind of comes from being a teenager when we moved out of that little town into the next town over, which had a much bigger population. We started going to a private school and we had people like access to people that we were friends with, that were peers that we went to school with, and so we got involved in everything.
Hmm.
I played sports, I was in band, I was in choir, I did shows, I sang out places, I did all of the things.
Hmm.
And so even now as an adult, like I record music, I do podcasts, I write, I perform, I like do all the things. I just got hired at the Chelsea Symphony in New York to do their marketing and PR, plus my sales job during the day. Like it's like there's so much
Busy.
going on.
That's
I always joke that if I would do like a day in a life or like get
Mhm.
ready with me for TikTok, it would be so boring because it would just be like I woke up and like now here I am at this desk and I'll be here until the sun goes down. Thank you so much.
But there's a lot going on at the desk.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the difference too, right? Like 2019, before shutdown happened, I was physically running all over the city to get done and be everywhere I needed to be.
Mhm.
And I'm still doing that, but it's just from the comfort of my apartment.
That's good. It's convenient.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, I don't really miss all of that.
yeah. I know when the COVID first started, I'm like, what the heck? I know here in Michigan, there was curfew and all this crazy stuff.
Oh yeah, no, we had it too. I mean, it was 9 o'clock curfew. Like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was that was some honestly, you know what? Like it was daunting to have that, but we made the best of it and we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I don't know how things are in Michigan. I'm assuming they're probably the same as New York, but you're not really allowed to drink outside on the street.
Yeah.
And so like that summer we were allowed to. And so
Yeah.
the whole place just became like New Orleans. And we were able to, there weren't a lot of people out
Mhm.
because of obvious circumstances, but me and my closest friends lived within a couple blocks of each other
Uh-huh.
during that period. And so we would just all get together. They were like part of my little pod,
Mhm.
and we'd go to these restaurants that would have like an outdoor bar set up,
Uh-huh.
and we'd get drinks to go and we'd just walk around the neighborhood or like hang out on the corner.
Mhm.
And I kind of miss it. Like
Yeah.
I always tell people, like, can we just have that little period of shutdown one
Mhm.
more time, like every
Yeah.
year, once a year for 30 days? Like let's just shut everything down,
Mhm.
everyone take a breather, like go drink outside on the sidewalk and like just be at peace and be chill.
Yeah.
Like yes, it was stressful, but like I was fortunate enough to have people that I loved and cared about near me and a lot of freedom to maneuver in
Mhm.
a lot of ways because of living in New York.
Mhm.
Yes, we live on top of each other, but the second you go outside, there's so much space. Like it's
Mhm.
it's crazy.
And I've never been to New York. I need to get out that way.
Yeah, you do.
I do.
It's a whole different ball game.
I bet it is. I can only imagine. I can't even imagine. I'm gonna have to book a trip out that way.
You should. I'll give you some places to go.
Okay, for sure. Um, so like after high school and all that, what was that like for you?
Um, that was such a strange period of time because I didn't go to college.
Uh-huh.
Never considered it. I had my older sister and her friends all went off to college and they'd come back and be like, this is terrible. And like the school I went to, the school I went to was always like, oh, we're top tier education. But then my friends would come back and be like, no, we're not prepared for what is coming.
Yeah.
And I wasn't focused on that. I decided really early that I wanted to be in the arts and perform and be an entertainer. And so
Mm-hmm.
college to me was like, why would I waste the time? Like
Mm-hmm.
put me where I can actually do it,
Yeah.
and let me find people to study with independently. And that's kind of what
Mm-hmm.
ended up happening. So after high school, there was no college conversation. I think I went to look at two schools. I went to go look at Philadelphia School of the Arts. Yeah, maybe it was just one school. And I only remember it because the dorm apartments that they would put you in that's in Philadelphia.
Uh-huh.
I was as tall as the apartment.
Really?
I had like this much, I had like an inch or two space above my head.
Wow.
It's like, how would I even live here? Like, never mind
Wow.
wearing a hat or anything. Like
Right.
that's out of the picture. So I moved to New York, and my parents were not for it. They were pretty against it, but I basically just told them like I was not kind. And I just said to them, like, you can either help me do this or I will go do it without you. But one
Mhm.
way or another, I will end up there.
And you know what? That's what I was gonna ask next. With both of your sisters going to college, how did your parents take it as far as you? Like, I know some people are raised in households where their parents are like, you gotta go to college, you gotta go to college.
Yeah.
And like me growing up, our grandparents taught us that they were really big on college. And I just beg to differ. Like, I'm in school now, but I just feel like college is not the only
Yeah, I mean
gateway.
things are changing,
Yeah,
and it's not the only way anymore.
yeah.
I work in like an online space, and
Uh-huh.
it's the Wild West. Like, it is the Wild West. I see people who are charging how much money, and you've done none of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But it's possible, if
Hmm.
you get people with real credentials and life experience in that
Hmm.
space, you can make a ton of money.
Absolutely.
College isn't necessary anymore. And to be honest, it hasn't been for a really, really long time. It's just the
Hmm.
cultural narrative has always been, you graduate high school, you go to college, you graduate, you get a job, you meet someone, you get married, you have kids, you buy a house.
The American dream.
It's a nightmare. You can't do it anymore. It's not possible. And so like we need to adapt or die.
Hmm.
And it's my older sister was very academic. She was top of her class, valedictorian. She went to one of the top conservatories in the world, and
Hmm.
has her doctorate degree, and that was her path.
Yeah.
And my little sister started college and then realized she hated it and dropped out. And there was some other drama that happened there that I won't talk about because that's her story, not mine.
Yeah.
But she ended up going to nursing school. She never finished that. And then it all led to her getting a paralegal through work, because they love her. So that was her path.
Okay.
And my path didn't feel good to do the college thing. First of all, there
Hmm.
was no money. Second of all, like my grades were garbage because I knew I wanted to entertain and be in theater and perform and all the other things. So it was like, why am I learning this stuff? I don't need
Right.
to know this.
Hmm.
It's not practical application for what I want to do in my life. And so the whole thing felt like a waste of time.
Uh-huh.
And the gag of it is, and I don't mean this in the way that I'm going to say it, but I kind of do, is that I kind of really didn't even need high school. Like
Yeah.
as much as I slacked off in high school, I still was learning. I
Hmm.
wasn't stupid. I was a straight A student up until like eighth or ninth grade.
Uh-huh.
And then I stopped caring because I
Yeah.
didn't want to do it anymore. And it
Hmm.
didn't make sense to me. So that's not right for everyone. And certainly like college works for some people. If you need that structure and you need that discipline and accountability, like absolutely that is for you. I
Hmm.
was not that.
Yeah.
And where I was academically speaking, I don't know where I'd be if I went to college. I would not be happy. I'd probably not be performing. I'd probably not be doing what I'm doing
Hmm.
now.
Yeah.
Um, but I think with the access to information on the internet that we have, if you have a specialization that you want to focus on, unless it's something medical and dealing with other people's lives, like
Hmm.
legal, doctor, engineer, the big things.
Hmm.
Even engineer, you probably don't need a degree. You can probably find all that shit online for free anyway, or hire someone independently to teach you,
Hmm.
and it would still cost less than college. Um, and this is probably going to piss a lot of people off me saying this, but
Hmm.
it's just true. I said years ago at the dawn of YouTube when the DIY things were starting to come out,
Uh-huh.
Like I said, one day there will be a YouTube University accreditation that you'll be able to get that
Hmm.
says you went through this and did all these things. And we're now seeing that in coaching world, which is insane.
Yeah.
There's certifications which in theory mean nothing, but if you can, we're in a place now where if you can show up and provide what they're asking you to, it
Yep.
doesn't matter.
Yep. Yep. And that's how, honestly, that's how it should be.
I agree.
Um, it absolutely should be
If
that
you
way.
if you can back it up, who cares?
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. So after you told your parents like you're pretty much gonna do this with or without them, how did they take that and were they like okay and just like stuck by you due to because it's ultimately your choice, or did they kind of like fall back from you?
There was many an argument.
Hmm.
There were, I don't want to say there were screaming matches, but there were strong words exchanged. Because they were afraid, and rightfully so. I mean, New York City is a huge, insane place to throw an 18-year-old
Hmm.
on their own with no friends, no job, no plan, no money, and just like go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thankfully I am my parents' child and I made it work because they're
Hmm.
savvy and smart and every all the other things. And thankfully I've gotten that, whether it be on purpose or by osmosis. But I was able to figure it out. And
Uh-huh.
I've always been able to figure it out. And I think that is not necessarily a commonality with everyone that moves here. Like certainly the whole like the city will chew you up and spit you out thing, like that's real.
Hmm.
But it's just kind of like having that sense of self and knowing this is what I want to do
Uh-huh.
and knowing what your bottom line is.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Wow. So once you decided that you weren't going to go to school, what did you pursue first?
What did I pursue first? I mean, I moved when I moved to New York, the first thing in my mind was that I wanted to be a pop star, right? Like I grew up listening to Hanson, which you're probably too young to remember. But they were like these teenage boys from like Kansas or Oklahoma or some shit. And it was like these three guys that were brothers and they played great music and it was like poppy and folky and fun and songwritery and I wanted to do that. And I added a little bit of rock to it. And me and my dad wrote an album together between when I think it was like early mid-teens. And so I had this album and I was like, I'm moving to New York and I'm going to make this happen.
Hmm.
And the music scene in New York back then, like circa Lady Gaga era, when she was down there too, around the same time, like it was wild. I just made a TikTok about this too. I had met Rachel Platten doing that. We did like an industry showcase thing. You like go to these industry things, you bring people along, and you hope that someone from a record label or some person would be there, and you do the things and you perform. And I met her at one of those, and we were very briefly friends because she moved to LA shortly after that. But that was hard. You would be standing around DJ booths asking them to play your track, and like things were just starting to go digital. So like the whole thumb drive of like here's my song, it was like here's a CD. Like
Yeah.
I was so out of it. This is MySpace territory. So um I wasn't good at it, and it was a scary time. And I kind of I was afraid of it and I didn't want to stick around for it because it didn't feel good. So what I ended up doing then was figuring out how to audition for musicals and theater. And so I did that for 15 years.
Okay. So, um, wow, 15 years is a long time. That's amazing. So let me ask you this.
It feels longer.
So once you started that, were your parents like, I I mean, did they ever like sit down and were like, oh, we were overreacting. We see that you're doing fine.
um those words were never said outright, but we had come to, I think, a silent agreement that like, okay, you're going to be all right.
Okay.
And I'm not entirely sure when that happened,
Hmm.
because right as I was just starting to get some semblance of footing,
Hmm.
I got cancer. And
Uh-huh.
then everything was in emergency mode.
Mhm.
And so I think it wasn't until after that period of time, though, my parents were like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess you're gonna be all right.
Mhm. Wow. So let me ask you this with the cancer, right? So would you tell everyone what type of cancer that it was?
Sure. It's so long. Okay, so it's rare enlarged B cell Burkitt's like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Okay.
It's super rare. The Burkitt's component of it is typically only found in children in Africa, in certain parts of Africa. And so me being a 25-year-old like white guy from the United States like made absolutely no sense. And so there was this huge question mark that people were like, what the fuck is happening?
Mhm.
And so then the enlarged B cell component was because I had this huge swollen tumor under my left arm.
Mhm.
It was wild. It was wild. Absolutely enormous. It looked like we called it my third boob. We named it Seymour. It kept growing.
I'm
I
sorry.
still have stretch marks on the side of my
Uh-huh.
body from it. It was so gross.
Mhm.
But yeah, that was that.
So let me ask you this. Prior to finding out about the cancer, what were the like signs or symptoms? Or you just went for a checkup one day and things were abnormal?
It was my doctor kept telling me that I was the picture of health when this happened. He's like, I don't understand. Because I had no symptoms. The only symptom, like quote unquote symptom that I had was the tumor, which started out small and I felt it under my arm and I was like, huh, what is that? And then over time, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it was like visible, like looking at me, you'd be like, what is that?
Hmm.
It was not good. And I would like do things to like readjust and try and hide it behind my arm, or I'd stand like this, or I'd just like like tuck my arm over somehow because it was hideous, it was horrible. And otherwise I felt great. And I when I came back from I was doing a contract in Reno, Nevada at that time, and when I came back my doctor was like, are you sure you feel okay? I was like, yeah, I feel great. He's like, because you look great and I don't understand why this is happening,
Hmm.
because it was like a grapefruit like under my arm,
Wow.
literally. So like go put a grapefruit under your arm and see how that feels.
Was it painful to carry that around?
It was only painful if I like tried to lift my arm past a certain point because it was
Okay.
attached to things and so it would like pull.
Uh-huh.
And so I couldn't really like move my arm past like a
Uh,
certain point. Or
wow.
if I was at the gym like trying to lift or something, then it would like rub and it was uncomfortable. But
Hmm.
it was never like excruciating pain. It was
Hmm.
always just like, ugh, this thing is in the way.
Yeah. So when you found out you had cancer, tell me what was going through your mind. I know that had to be scary, especially for it to be a rare kind.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't think that there was ever really a period of time where I dealt with it really until the first day that I checked into the hospital. That was jarring to say the absolute least. Like I had a full meltdown in the little waiting room.
Uh-huh.
It was ugly and loud. Um, and then I don't really think I fully comprehended or dealt with it again truly until it was over.
Uh-huh.
I kind of went into this like place where it was like, I'm fine.
Hmm.
What? What? And just drank my way through it and was comfortably numb for a good year.
Wow, so you drank while you had the cancer?
Oh yeah, it was a terrible idea. Like
Oh,
don't recommend at all.
yeah.
Um, but it was yeah, I would say I drank my way through chemo
Uh-huh.
because once I think it was like the second or third round of chemo, things were not going well, and my oncologist let me know that. And after a treatment, that I basically bullied the nurse into like giving me the dosage faster so I could get
Uh-huh.
out of there, which should never have happened, but it did. I asked my doctor if I could go drink. And she was like, you can have like one or two. And I was like, cool. And then I had like 20 because it
Well,
was like, nope, bye. And as soon as that seal was broken, I was like, cool. I guess I can do this and be fine. So
yeah.
that's what's going to happen. And it wasn't good. And I shouldn't have done it, especially, but like, I think my liver was like, well, this isn't chemo. So this is kind of a walk in the park. Let's do
Hmm.
it.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that the journey would have been different, like mentally, if you would have been sober through the whole thing? Do you think you would have like be in your right mind? Some stuff like that is so stressful for some people. It makes them like really go through like a breakdown.
I don't really know. I mean, I guess I kind of have considered that before, but like I guess the first 2 months that I was in chemo, I wasn't drinking.
Mhm.
And I was okay. But really, when I started drinking was when I started to not be okay. So I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that. I think there's a possibility that I would have been a lot more um detached or depressed or something like that, because what I was doing essentially was finding coping mechanisms
Mm,
to feel normal, to feel any kind of way than I was. And
mm.
there was a whole situation with like pot brownies that happened where I overdosed on those by accident,
Did you?
which was a whole thing. And it was like me crawling on the floor
Uh-huh.
because I couldn't walk. But I did a lot of shit I shouldn't have done to
Yeah.
try and cope with it.
Mm,
And like I can't imagine that experience fully sober.
mm,
And I'm not trying to say like I could never have done it,
mm,
but like considering that experience and the state that I was in, I don't really know how that would have ended differently.
mm. Now let me ask you this, because some people, when they find out they have cancer, don't want to go through chemo.
Yeah, I mean, that's real. And that kind of, I think that's a lot of like rooted in the fear of the unknown.
Mm,
Uh I didn't want to do my stem cell transplant. I flat out told my first oncologist that I didn't want to do it. Radiation had seemed to be working, so it was like, why am I doing this? And then when I moved to my second opinion and got my other oncologist, who was the one who ended up saving my life, she was like, yeah, no, you don't have to do the stem cell transplant, but you won't live till 30.
mm,
So your decision is yours.
yeah.
And it really is just kind of like the want to fight to live.
Mm,
And beyond that, I mean, there is a quality of life conversation to be had. Chemo's rough. I had it so easy compared to what people warned me about and what I thought it was going to be like.
yeah.
Um, but it yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that mindset goes where you're just like, I don't want to be helped.
Mm,
I'm terrible at asking for help. It's a thing that I want to like work on
yeah.
and have been. And during that period of time, asking for help was not a thing that I would do. So I think that that was like a big moment where it's like, oh, like
Yeah.
not gonna be able to fix this myself.
Yeah.
And I would like to live. So let's
Right.
do what we need to.
And you were 25 at this time?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I can't even imagine.
Weird year.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, because I mean it's like the best part of your life. You're the
Mhm.
hottest you're ever gonna be at that time. Um, you know, I was walking around like a little fuck boy, and then cancer was like, no, bitch. and
Wow.
uh and it was like a really big interrupt because I had a lot of things going on professionally that would have been very good for me. I had a lot of things come my way during that period of time that I had to say no to,
Hmm.
because I wasn't telling anyone that I had cancer outside of my family and circle of friends. And it was a big derailment. And there's, you know, I could look at it as such and be like pissed off about it and just be like, you know, yeah, I could be mad about this and I could be really upset that like this thing took my life and
Hmm.
flushed it. Or I can be like, cool, I get to start over. What can I do now and
Hmm.
how can I build the life that I want to have? And it's taken me 10 years to get to a place where I'm like, oh, that's what I'm doing. But now I'm just owning it and being like, I don't have the life that I want, and no, and now I'm going to go get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let me ask you this. So say if some of the listeners out there are having to experience the same thing, what can you tell them to help them transition from that, from one mindset to the next, if they're in that type of like situation?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot to, I mean, obviously, this is why I wrote my book, right? Because that transition is very strange.
Hmm.
You know, so cancer, musical theater, and other chronic illnesses is a good place to start my book. But it's why I wrote it. And it's because there isn't a whole lot of conversation around that transition. And you kind of go through two separate deaths, right? Three, maybe. The first being that like the person you were before you went into treatment is gone. Like
Hmm.
just say goodbye to that person. That person doesn't exist anymore and they never will again. Because going into treatment, you've changed.
Hmm.
And, you know, and depending on how severe the scenario is, like there's nuance to this. I'm making blanket statements. But then the person that you are in treatment and like the professional patient that I call it, that person then also dies and goes away. And so then on the other side of it, being someone who is cancer free or without cancer, that is a whole different person.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to add to that person what you would like to add to that person. And it has to be done from a place of intention and want to do it. Um, I think the best example I can give is like I fought it so hard. I didn't want to admit that the person I was different. And so I tried really hard to be the person I was before.
Mm-hmm.
And it just never felt right. For,
Yeah.
I mean, for years, we're talking years
Mm-hmm.
of like being like, why don't I feel the way that I did before? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
over. I should be able to take me before and me after and just like sew them together and
Back
pretend that this
together.
pocket of
Yeah.
time never happened.
Yeah.
And you just can't, and you shouldn't try, honestly, because you're given this amazing
Yep.
opportunity to be a blank slate and start over. So
Yep.
why wouldn't you
Mm-hmm.
take the things that maybe you want that still naturally organically exist within you and paint them differently?
Yep. And you know what? I noticed that like a lot of times us as humans with all transitions, like we look back at, where we were comfortable at, like, oh, things were good then, and I want to get back to how life used to be. I used to drive this car, be living like this, or all this stuff when it's like God has given us this space to be better, better than we were before. So like you said, take the paint and make something different. Um,
And
what, what,
to that point, really quick,
uh,
to that point, you have the choice to do that at any time.
mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be after a trauma. It doesn't have to be after a big event in your life
You're right.
happens.
Yeah.
You can like, and that's one thing I love about New York too, not to tie this back in,
No, you're
but
fine.
like you can just disappear
Mm,
and become a totally different person.
really?
It's so easy. Like I have my friends that I keep around and that keep me around, that we love and we have a respect. I've known them for over a decade, all of them at this point for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I want them around and I choose to keep them around because you get to choose who that family is. But outside of that,
Mm-hmm.
you like I've completely rebranded my whole life within the last
Wow.
2 years.
Yeah.
Like what I was doing 2 years ago is not what I was doing last year, and it's not what I was doing 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things that you can just do. You get to
Mm-hmm.
decide. Like
Yep.
if you wake up one day and you don't want to be who you are right now, you get to change it.
Yep.
And that's just a decision that you get to make. It's as simple as dyeing your hair or changing the outfit you're wearing. Like and coming from a marketing and sales background, like every day is marketing and sales.
Mm.
It's down to how you wear your hair, to how you talk to people, who you talk to, the clothes that you wear, how you walk. All of those things are marketing and sales, and all of those things, like marketing and sales, can be changed.
That's good. I like that.
So change your life.
I like that. I like
Rebrand,
it.
do the
Yeah, I
rebrand.
like that. I like that. It's time to rebrand. I like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Companies do it all the time, and there's no reason why you can't either.
yeah, that's very true. I've never thought about it like that. I really like that. Um, okay, another question. So how long were you in chemo for?
Chemo was really short. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, everything was really short.
Uh-huh.
Um, I was between my first day in the hospital and being told I didn't have cancer anymore was 10 months,
Okay.
which was really fast for a lot of cancer treatments, especially because this was so rare and aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Chemo itself specifically was only 3 months. I had 4 rounds of chemo once every like 3 to 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And after round 4, they were like, this isn't working and we're going to try something else. And that's when I went into radiation. And then radiation was a month long and that was working. And then they needed to wait a period of time to see if any of the cancer would come back. And it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were like, okay, well, the final nail in this is going to be the stem cell transplant. And I said no. And that's when I moved to the second hospital. And they were like, okay, cool, but you'll die. So, so yeah, that and all of that. I mean, I spent summer of 2012 locked in a hospital room. So when quarantine happened with COVID, I was like, I got this. I've done this already. I know how this works.
Right.
Let's go.
Yeah. Um, oh, it was something else I was gonna ask you. And it just wiped from my mind. Um, so when you walked out of the hospital or when you were finished, oh no, I know what I was gonna ask you. Where did you ever reach a point where you were like accepting of death? Like this is the end. I'm gonna die.
No. And there's a caveat to this. No, but there was a moment I had a ton of complications that I totally brought on myself during this period of time. One of which was a parasite. I went to go visit my sister in Florida and decided to like this was during radiation, so like decided to spend a day on the beach and like go and swim in the ocean and all the things. And because the ocean is filthy and I had no immune system to speak of, I got a parasite. And so I'm like flying back on the plane. I'm like, I don't feel great.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, in the spirit of keeping busy, I was running a magazine at the time and I had a photo shoot that day. So I like went from the plane to my apartment to the photo shoot. Didn't feel great at the photo shoot. I had a second photo shoot right after that at my apartment. And so I went back to my apartment from South Street Seaport and was like laying on the floor, like creative directing this thing, like, okay, do it from this angle, do it like,
I'm
and then
sorry. Yeah.
finally everybody left. It was funny. It was so
Yeah.
ridiculous. And so finally everybody left and I was like, I just don't, this isn't good.
Yeah.
And I went to the hospital. Once they figured out what it was, I was quarantined immediately. Like the other person in my room was taken out and they like sealed the door.
Wow.
And I was on all these drugs and I had a fever of like 102 and it just
Mm.
wasn't. And my friend Jordan came to visit me and I just looked at him and I was like, what if this is it? And he was like, this is not it. I was like, but what if it is? I was like, this is so stupid that this is how I would fucking die from a parasite from the ocean. Like,
Wow.
how dare the universe? And so I had that one moment where I was like, what if this is it? But I think deep down, I never believed it.
Mm-hmm.
Deep down, I was like, no, I've got this. Like, there's no way that this is taking me down. I won't let it. And I don't know if I ever said that out loud, but it definitely was how I felt. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe possibly one of the reasons why I just maneuvered in my life the way that I would have otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, and you know what, by the way, like I picked up a parasite after coming back from Puerto Rico. And when I say I don't think I've ever felt so bad in my life,
Oh my
like
God, it's the worst.
yeah, you just feel terrible. I'm like, what is this? I have to go to the hospital. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't
Yeah.
barely sit. Like it just felt gross to be in my own skin. I'm like, what is
Yeah.
going on?
I mean, I lost 15 pounds in 4 days and I looked
Really?
amazing, but like still,
Yeah.
I like left that hospital like, oh my God, all my friends are gonna be like, you look great.
Yeah. So, like with that whole mindset, um, with pretty much like a mental fight, to really keep pushing and keep thriving and keep going, um, what could you say to someone who doesn't have that to help them maybe get there?
Um, I think the real answer to this, I think, is that you will get it. Um, and if because when we're put in situations where it's do or die, right? Like our bodies and our brains are super smart and they're programmed to live.
Mhm.
I was reading about something the other day that like reading, who am I kidding? I saw it on a TikTok. Um, anytime I said I've read something, it's because I saw it on TikTok. But they were talking about there's certain scenarios in which your brain will kill your body in order
Mhm.
to live
Mhm.
because the brain's job is to remain alive
Mhm.
and without knowing that if the body dies, it dies.
Mhm.
And so like it's very survival oriented in that way. So if you were in a scenario where your life is at stake,
Uh,
your body is going to do everything it can to survive.
okay.
And I think something about being told that you have cancer and you might die immediately puts you in this space of like after you feel the feelings of that news hitting you,
Mhm.
I think you automatically kind of default to this place of survival.
Uh-huh.
And for someone who might not have that, I mean, find people around you that you trust and love to help you get through that because it's
Mhm.
hard. I mean, even having that, it was difficult.
Yeah.
But there was never really a time where I wanted to give up or I thought maybe I should stop trying.
Mhm. That's good. That's good. And I'm glad you didn't because you're still here. Thank
I'm
God.
still I'm still here.
And so let me ask you this. So once the chemo and all that stuff was done and you found out you were cancer free, what did you transition into then?
That was I think that was the hardest part. And I talk about this a lot too, where I actually think that surviving cancer is harder than having it. And
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by that is when you're in a hospital and you're being treated, you have a whole team of people looking out for you. You have a schedule of places you need to be. Sometimes you have foods you can and cannot eat.
Mm-hmm.
It's very regimented.
Mm-hmm.
And when that's over, not only is that gone, but like I said before, the life you had before is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're just kind of left there like,
Okay, now what?
now
Yeah.
what? Exactly. So
Yeah.
so
Wow.
it's this really bizarre like rebirth kind of situation where you're just kind of like standing in familiar places with familiar people, not recognizing a shred of it
Wow.
and having to figure out how do I maneuver here?
Mm-hmm.
And again, this goes back to like painting yourself differently or like rebranding, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
where you just have to make one decision at a time as to who the person that you want to become is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not so much rebuilding, it's just building.
And you know what? That's crazy because so like you and I, when we spoke the other day, I told you, well, I shared with you, my mother had cancer. This was years ago, and it was like a couple years before she died. And she had breast cancer, and she had it twice. But during both times, like through the process, she never spoke to us about any of that. Like she was already done and had beat it both times and ultimately had her breast reconstructed. And it's just always made me wonder because after like she did tell us about it, she would tell us about, how it was going through the chemo and the radiation and how much pain, how painful it was. And just the different thoughts that would go through her mind. And I'm just like, you know, and so watching her rebuild herself, like with the reconstruction of her breasts and different things like that. Now, it kind of gives me a better idea of like her life at that time and what was going through her mind and just a lot of different things and also like other people, I've never had cancer, thank God, and by the grace of God I hope I never do, but it just makes me wonder, because cancer is a big thing, with a lot of people, and so I just wonder like what's that like.
Um, it's
Because I know it's stressful, right? Because a lot of people do die from cancer, but there are also
yeah,
a lot that don't, So I'm wondering like about the thought process during and after and all that,
there's a lot of panic.
Mm-hmm.
At least for me there was a whole like period of time where I was just the biggest hypochondriac you've ever heard,
Mm-hmm.
where like the tiniest little scratch or bruise or
Yeah.
something else, if it wasn't healing fast enough, like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I have something else, or like my lymphoma turned into leukemia and here I go. And a lot of that was influenced by what was happening around me. I had a
Mm-hmm.
friend who had leukemia, found out about it very late. They were in a car accident and the bruises weren't healing. And so
Wow.
they went to a hospital and they were like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And like 4 months later he was dead.
Wow.
And so like anytime I had a bruise, I was like, oh my God, it's not healing. I have leukemia. I'm gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just compulsively feeling like
Mm-hmm.
you're like checking your lymph nodes and making sure like if any little abnormality happened, you were like, oh my God, like it's coming back. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? It's blah, blah, blah. Don't make me go back there.
Yeah.
It's very panicky in that sense. And and then also like you have to deal with the physical portion of it too, where your body's been completely destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And so as your hair grows back, as you start building muscle again, even from just like walking,
Mm-hmm.
because you're nothing, you have become nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're a walking rib cage with clavicles.
Wow.
And you start to see like muscle tone coming back, and like then it goes into this whole like, oh my God, am I getting fat? But like, no, you're just used to seeing yourself look like
Yeah.
Skeletor. And like this is, and that's a whole different aspect of conversation, to like what happens to your body and the dysmorphia of it all.
Mhm.
Um, but I guess in some ways it was adventurous, because it was like navigating every step again, like very like
Yeah.
Indiana Jones. Um, and at the same time, it was very scary because of like everything I just said, with like compulsively checking to make
Mhm.
sure that you're okay.
Yeah. How did you manage to get out of that, or is that something that you still face now?
It just kind of got better with time, like it was years of that, where any little thing was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But
Yeah.
you just kind of outgrow it. And I think that it happened to me again this past year, and that was the first time it happened in almost a decade,
Mhm.
where I had a moment where I was like,
Yeah.
and thankfully it was nothing,
Yeah.
because of course it was.
Yeah.
But you have little moments where you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right.
Mhm.
Why?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're back and better, you know.
Yeah, I
Um,
wouldn't trade it.
that's amazing. So, um, once you got your life like back on track, um, what would you say you like dove into first? What was the thing that really brought you the most like fulfillment?
um I mean, I started out at the gym,
Okay.
like it was close by. Um I treated myself to the expensive fancy gym.
Okay.
It was like 200 something dollars a month, which was insane.
Mm,
um but I was like, you know what, I deserve it, I'm gonna do
mm,
it.
yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
And that just became something I did every single day. Obviously I've stopped doing that every single day, but at the time,
Yeah.
I was going every morning at like 9:30. I'd haul my ass out of bed and go work out for a couple hours
Mm,
and come back home. And that was like something that grounded me,
hmm.
that like helped me feel back to normal.
Yeah.
Um, and again, like loving to be busy.
Hmm.
I started working as soon as I possibly could.
Hmm.
It took a while. I started drinking much as soon as I possibly could.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
um, but it was just kind of like getting those pieces back, but then also not feeling entirely like this doesn't feel right and I don't know why.
Yeah.
Um, and that played a big part of it, was just like trying to force myself to go back into jobs I didn't want to have,
Hmm.
and going back into, like, I was a full-time actor in the middle of it. And the scary part is that like I disappeared for a whole year
Uh-huh.
in this community, and nobody fucking noticed.
Wow.
And that was kind of nice. It was like, part of it was like, "Ugh, nobody missed me," but then it was kind of nice that I didn't have to explain to everyone where I had been,
Hmm.
outside of the people that I wanted to know.
Yeah.
And but again, it never sat well. And like I'd get jobs, and I was very lucky to be able to still book shows and travel around the country doing them. But it like never, I think I always was doing something else because I always wanted something more, and I didn't know what that meant outside of what I was already doing.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of like searching by like creating things, I guess.
And that's good because it gives us a sense of purpose. Um, and it also filters out a lot of stuff that we carry around.
Oh yeah.
That's amazing. Um, Yikes, I keep drawing these blanks. It was something else that I was gonna ask you that was just running in my brain. Um, so outside of the gym, so no, let me back up some. So what was the first project that you would say that you dove into that or created after that whole thing?
I mean, I did it during
Okay.
chemo. I was dating this guy who was very, very tall,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted to be a writer, but he wasn't really writing anything. And so I had made this. I don't even get me started. Don't get me started on men in general, and then also this particular one. Um, but he wasn't doing anything to pursue any kind of anything that he wanted to do. And so I had suggested one day in passing, why
Mm-hmm.
don't you do like an online magazine or a blog or something about tall men? Like you
Mm-hmm.
are one.
Mm-hmm.
Who could speak to more authority on that than someone who is living that experience?
Uh-huh.
And he was like, "Oh, that's stupid. Like no one's gonna read that. Like who cares or whatever." And I was like, "Okay." And so when he broke up with me in the middle of chemo, I needed something to do to distract myself. So I was like, "I'm gonna do it, bitch." And so I did. I started an online magazine. It was called There Are Giants, and it was all about like tall men and lifestyle around them. And we got to work with a bunch of different brands. Like I
Mhm.
totally was an influencer without realizing I was an influencer.
Wow. Hmm.
And I only was able to really realize that this year. It's
Uh-huh.
like, oh yeah, I was totally an influencer. I was getting brand deals, and like that's not what I was calling them.
Hmm.
It was like to me, it was more like a partnership or they had hired me to do something or whatever. But I worked with LL Bean and Bonobos and Indochino and Land's End, and
Uh-huh.
I was doing like social media drops for different companies and getting paid to do it. I got a ton of free clothes.
Hmm.
Um, I worked with all of these different custom made clothes clothing brands.
Hmm.
I had a closet full of button-down shirts and suits from these that I didn't
Wow.
have to pay a cent for, and all I had to do was put them on, photograph it, write about them, give them a review, and call it a day.
Wow.
Um, some of them paid me outside of that, some of them didn't, but like I created this whole thing, and it was the best like comeuppance that could have possibly happened after that breakup because I was like, look who has all the brand deals, bitch. Like this could have been you. But you still work at Old Navy. So it it definitely was like a thing that kept me afloat and kept me going.
Hmm.
I loved doing it. I got to meet some really cool people that I'm still in touch with now.
Uh-huh.
Because of that, it got me writing, it got my brain active. I was literally like in the hospital having chemo, like creative directing a photo shoot on FaceTime that was happening all the way across town.
Wow.
And so it was a really beautiful distraction.
Hmm.
And after about 5 years, if I would have just held on
Hmm.
a little bit longer, the big and tall conversation got really big with the body positivity movement and everything else. And it just would have been so much bigger than it was. And maybe one day I'll go back to it, but it was a lot of fun to do. And it saved me in a lot of ways because otherwise I would have just been sitting around, you know,
Yeah.
dreaming of who knows what. But
Oh.
that gave me people to talk to,
Mm.
things to write about, things to research. I did a whole thing on the Olympics one year. I found all the athletes that were over 6'3", I think,
Wow.
and I made like write-ups about every single one of them. It was
Wow.
great. I had a really good time doing that, and I kind of wish I never gave it up.
That sounds amazing. So let me ask you this too. So after the whole experience, I know you said that you didn't reveal this to anybody except for like your family and close friends. Were there people that you told about it after the fact? And if so, what was their reaction?
Yeah, so as soon as I got the call from the hospital that I was cancer free,
Hmm.
I posted it on social media, which
Wow.
I had basically been off of social media for the whole year for the most part.
Mm.
Um, and so that whole process was really strange because I kind of knew what was coming.
Mm.
After my stem cell transplant, I had to wait 100 days until they were able to say you're good.
Wow.
And around that 100 days, I had to go in and have a ton of biopsies done where
Mm.
they took like needles and they were like shoving them in my body in different places and trying to find living cancer cells. And there were scans involved, there were blood tests involved. There's so many. I think I was at the hospital all day doing all of these things. And while I was there, they would like do a biopsy and preemptively put it under a microscope to look for living cancer cells, and they'd be like, no, all clear. And they did that, I think, like 15 or so times. And
Wow.
so, and it was slow. There were two people doing it, and so I'm just laying there like with my arm up like
Wow.
and so during that time they couldn't find any living cancer cells, but they were like, we can't say that there aren't any there because we need to send this off to a lab to have it officially analyzed. We can only do so much here. Like preemptively it looks good, but hold off, we're going to wait.
Mm.
And so I spent like that week just on the edge of everything, like
I bet you did.
like someone hand me a cocktail. And So I remember I was sitting at my desk in my apartment and they called me and they told me the news. And that was again like full body breakdown.
Yeah.
Um, had a good cry, called my parents, called my sisters, called my
Wow.
grandparents, like told everyone who was in the inner circle
Mhm.
first. And then I made a post about it on Facebook and other social media. I mean, what was even around back then? Instagram, I guess. I don't know.
Mm.
Um, but that kind of was how I guess kind of came out about it is telling the people who were there for me first and then moving into um, other people.
I'm so happy for you.
Well,
I'm so
thank
happy
you.
for you. That's amazing. Oh my goodness.
It was a wild ride, and like it pops up on my Facebook memories every so often, and it's a really weird thing to see.
Yeah.
Like this time in 2012, like I was doing prep chemo for my stem cell transplant, and then
Well,
I got the parasite, and then that got delayed. So right around March it was radiation time. This time was like all the complications time. July was the transplant. And then my birthday's October 7th, and they called me October 5th to tell me that I was
wow.
cancer free. So it's like this night, and that was the
Happy
day.
birthday.
Thank you. And that was the that October 5th is the day that my book was published.
Wow,
And
congratulations.
we did that on purpose.
Yeah.
It's like, can we make sure it's on this day, please?
That's nice.
Yeah, so it's been 10 years of trying to re-navigate life in
Hmm.
a purposeful and intentional kind of way. And so I find myself on podcasts like this, and I like
Hmm.
talking about it can be kind of trippy and kind of weird
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
it's like revisiting a period of time that feels like so many lifetimes ago.
Hmm.
And 10 years is not a long time.
No.
Like I've now been cancer free longer than I lived in New York before I got cancer.
Wow.
And so it's just kind of like looking back at it and having like these strange memories that pop up. Like the other day I was talking to someone who asked me, did they ever give you like you have a 50-50% chance of living or dying? And I was like, no. And then I thought about it, I was like, no, actually, on my first appointment with my oncologist, I remember her looking up statistics for this particular type of cancer, and it was like I think I don't remember what it was, but 45% for some reason is sticking in my head. And I'm not sure if that was living rate, dying rate, reoccurrence
Hmm.
rate. I'm not really sure what it was, but I remember
Wow.
45% for some reason. And so like stuff like that comes up and I'm like, oh right, that did happen.
Wow. And you know what? That's amazing that you're still here to tell your story. And I thank you so much, like, for coming on here to share it. It's
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you for having me. You're
It's
great.
powerful. So you want to tell everybody what all do you have going on these days? And if people want to work with you outside of this, how can we find you?
Oh my God, come work with me. So my book that was published last year for my 10-year cancer anniversary, cancer free anniversary. No, cancer free, cancer free.
Right.
Okay, let's get
Yeah.
that right. That is available on like Barnes and Noble, Walmart.com, Apple Books. It's called Cancer Musical Theater and Other Chronic Illnesses by me, Edward Miskie. And I just today launched a podcast called How to Be a Big Deal, which is going to be available everywhere pretty shortly. I'm still working out the things on the back end to make that
Uh-huh.
happen. And then next month, my friend Sarah and I are launching a podcast called I Want to Be a Rich Bitch, which is going to be hilarious. We were editing some of it last night. It's ridiculous. And then June, in New York City for Pride weekend, I have a billboard of my book going up in Times Square.
Wow.
And I'm very excited about this. Like
That's major.
this is like kind of the reason why I'm doing all of these other things leading up to it, because it just feels so like the dream I wanted, but not how I thought I was going to get it.
Yeah.
And so like again, like owning it and creating that life that I wanted in the first
Hmm.
place.
That's amazing. Congratulations. That's major. That's
Thank you. Yeah.
major.
There's going
That
to be
is,
a whole camera crew. We're going to have
oh
friends. I want to take like
yes.
sparkling alcohols along to like drink on the street. Like, arrest me. It's fine. My face is 55 feet high, bitch. Cuff me.
Well, I hope you definitely enjoy yourself that day. That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining me on the show. And
Anytime.
thank you everyone that's tuned in. And also, do you want to leave your social media?
Oh my God, yes. It's all of it everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, everything is at Edward Miskie.
Okay. Okay, great. And thank you everyone for joining us. Also, please go over to www.greatergrowthllc.com and support the t-shirt and hoodie websites. And until next time.